important notion of cost, of specific cost. We don't really, it's more difficult to know that such costs is really incurred, but in some sense we probably can be confident that it is. Because for one thing, there is simply a genomic burden. We need to maintain these loci, to express them, regulate them. Quite a bit of ATP is spent on this. But the other, perhaps more important sources of the cost are inhibition of horizontal gene transfer. And actually it has been shown in hospital environments that bacteria tend to lose the CRISPR-Cas more or less simultaneously requiring antibiotic resistance. And that makes sense, because when you have the CRISPR-Cas system, there is a great chance that any antibiotic resistance plasmid will be destroyed. And then there are also some poorly studied but described cases of autoimmunity. Then the CRISPR-Cas system apparently malfunctions and includes a spacer homologous to a piece of the host genome. So, much like animal immunity, this seems to come at a cost. So we developed this model, and I have been thinking. I have other versions of this talk with a considerable number of equations. So I thought about that and thought I decided not to show you any. I hope you will not be too dissatisfied with this. So just describe it verbally, and I think it's not hard to understand. Basically, what we put into this model is a certain diversity of the host and viral strains that interact by mass action, by the products of frequencies and the hosts. And then there is a sort of mutation selection arms race, whereby hosts evolve CRISPR loci that provide immunity, and viruses alter product spaces and escape the immunity. So there is a combination of selection and mutation, selection, and genetic drift, as in any evolutionary process. Basically, so we have the initial state with some diversity of viruses with outer spaces and some diversity of hosts with spaces. To begin with, they are considered to be unrelated. These products, the host population is naive, so to speak. They are considered to be unrelated to the broader species, but then there are interactions, and as a result of these interactions, there are productive interactions where viruses kill, or a virus kills the host, and in the process it may mutate the broader spaces, and then there are immune interactions. Then for some reason, purely stochastically, all are likely thanks to some background immunity, such as restriction notification system. The host survives, and then it can adapt. It can integrate a spacer related to the given virus. So there are interaction-dependent mutations, which include acquisition of spacers and mutation of protospacers in the virus, and interaction-independent mutations, such as the acquisition and loss of the entire loci by the host. And there is the genetic drift as an important component of the model, which we approximated to the Poisson distribution. So once you implement all these processes in a relatively simple algorithm, you can run evolution in the computer for a great number of generations. And on this and the several next slides, I'll show you these thermal maps. I briefly explain what they are. So here we have it's like a three-dimensional plot, pretty much, where the color serves as a the third dimension. Here we have the virus diversity, more precisely viral or mutation rate from low here to high. Here and here we have the cost of the CRISPR from low here to high here. And interesting, already somewhat interesting outcome is that we have this rather clean separation, whereby at some combinations of the CRISPR cost and the viral mutation rate you preserve, the outcome of evolution is such that the maintenance of the CRISPR-Cas is beneficial to the cost, and it's preserved, this brown area, where pretty much, you see here, what is important here is this color contrast. It's pretty much like a phase transition between the fraction of 1, where all your strains, this is done for a great variety of these versions, and below this separatrix line, with few exceptions, effectively all of your strains maintain this. Above this separatrix line, where the cost is relatively high, and the viral mutation rate is relatively high. You lose the CRISPR loss. It's not justified, so to speak, in terms of selection to maintain. When the mutation virus mutation rate is really high, then you practically can have it only at zero cost, which is supposedly unrealistic. On this terminal that shows you the probability that the CRISPR locus provides immunity. This is just a preservation of the locus. This is the functioning of the locus, providing immunity. This comes out in an even more clear fashion. Although we do have some intermediate probabilities here, the key result is that at a high virus mutation rate, you do not develop, the virus overwhelms the system, more or less no matter what. You cannot provide immunity with this sensor system. Similarly, at very high cost, which is more trivial, you cannot maintain it even at low viral diversity. And I will not go into this in all detail. We have very compatible results with cost spacer diversity, viral spacer diversity, and we can use other characteristics. So, what happens if we increase the spacer addition rate to sort of keep pace with the virus? Can the adaptive immune system stay in the race? The answer is no, not really. So these terminal maps show you CRISPR spacer addition rate against the virus mutation rate. Again, you see this separation. Remember, this is the sharp separation. Remember, these are host strains that maintain CRISPRs, and these are that lose them. These are the intermediate experimental results. You see that no matter how high your spacer addition rate will be, at some reasonable cost, the virus will overwhelm at high mutation rate. You have similar and more striking results with the probability that CRISPR provide immunity with the diversity of cost spacers and so on. So there is a certain diversity threshold that depends on the CRISPR cost. So these different curves here, different clouds or points here in the space of the diversity of viral protospacers and the fraction of the immune hosts with immunity provided by CRISPR goes to 0 at a certain viral diversity. And of course, predictably, the greater the cost, the lower diversity is sufficient for the virus to overwhelm the immune system. Notably, we find that longest CRISPR loci, the greatest number of repeats, at intermediate virus diversity, somewhere here. Yet, here we have relatively short CRISPR loci, but they are sufficient to provide immunity. This is a fraction of immune host strains. Then we increase the viral diversity, and the race starts in earnest. The loci grow, but they are also lost in some of the strains. When we increase diversity very significantly, the host simply loses. So we have more indications from these models that the longest CRISPR loci emerged prior to the loss of the CRISPR loci. So the bacteria speaking the host speaking anthropomorphically try to fight as long as they can, and then they lose. So the question is, does this have explanatory power? Can the viral diversity threshold explain why the CRISPR-Cas systems are so strongly overrepresented in thermovirus? Well, the jury is still out on this issue, simply because there isn't sufficient amount of experimental data on viral diversity and host diversity from the same systems. But there are a few studies. In particular, in this study that was done in Yellowstone Park, hot springs in Montana, it seemed that the first glance that the diversity of viral species in the hot springs approached that in moderate temperature environments. However, at the same time, the virus microaggregations in the hot springs were typically much lower than in moderate temperature in viruses. So my suspicion is, but certainly needs to be verified in many more studies, that the low virus-host ratio translates into relatively low effective viral diversity, because of which it's advantageous for the archea and for a few bacteria perhaps that live in those environments to maintain the CRISPR loci almost invariably. All right. So to finish the talk, the promised generalization. It will be next week. I will give this talk in Paris, very much within walking distance from this place, Jardin de Plantes, where Jean-Baptiste Lamarck sits for posterity. Of course, we all know what Lamarck proposed, and early on he was ridiculed in that manner for his famous example of the giraffe that supposedly evolved its extremely long neck by exercising. So Jean-Baptiste Lamarck himself, and what is called Lamarckism, really acquired a very, very bad name and was used in various ominous circumstances, which I don't have to review here. The reality of it, I think, is rather different, and it's not so clear who is getting the last laugh. Probably more than one person. To conceptualize this, let's think about three major modalities of evolution, which are characterized